Or you could even take a look at the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, who many years ago published the Pillars for a Healthy Work Environment. And you'll see there's a commonality among those given experts, that you're looking at skilled communication, true collaboration, authentic leadership, meaningful recognition, appropriate staffing, but none of them have talked about disruptive behavior. And I think this is where my work differs.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case.
This week on First Case, we have a treat for you. We're going to be speaking with Phyllis Quinlan, an executive coach with AORN, and a topic we have not talked about before as of yet, Melanie, and we are getting close to wrapping up our very first season, our first year of First Case podcasts. And today's interview is going to be one that I think is going to inspire a lot of people and also open their eyes, if you are an AORN member, to some benefits that you may not have been aware of that I really want to strongly encourage that membership to take advantage of.
Oh, definitely. When Phyllis gets to talking about the coaching that she offers through AORN and that she's been doing it for 10 years, I've been in the OR for 10 years and I didn't know this existed. And I could have been taking advantage of the help that she offers for 10 years. I mean, every year I could have done it again. And there's so much value in what she offers and what she has to offer all the AORN members. Hearing everything she does and the advice that she has and her experience in coaching is going to be helpful to everybody who listens today.
So it also piggybacks off an episode that we had very early on about bullying and disruptive behavior in the operating room. But we're also going to be talking about late career transitions. We're going to be talking about brand new staff in the environment and all the different needs that, nurses and other staff in the operating room really have to go through all these different changes and different stages of their career. And she's got something for everybody. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with Phyllis Quinlan.
Hi, I'm Paul Wafer.
I'm Melanie Perry.
I'm Jeremy Gibson-Rohr.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A 17 Studios production, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Phyllis Quinlan, executive coach with AORN. And Phyllis, we've been looking forward to this interview. And I'll be honest with you, I did not even know that AORN had a coaching program. So I'm excited to talk to you some more about it today. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Justin. Not only does AORN have a professional coach offering coaching, to its members, in February, I will be with them 10 years.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, obviously, we're having you come on today to talk about, your work with AORN, but what were you doing leading up to that?
So I am a nurse by training, and I've been a nurse for 43 years. So I've been all over the place clinically. I specialized in critical care emergency trauma. And then somewhere along the line, I found myself in subacute care and assisted living and long-term care for a short period of time. But I've been a clinician. I've been an educator. I've been an administrator. Prior to a nurse, I was a psychiatric social worker for a very short period of time and decided instead of going for my master's in social work, which was required at the time, I was going to go back and become a nurse. So I thought I would be the world's greatest psychiatric nurse, and I've never practiced in a psychiatric setting at all. So I used all of that training in the critical care, emergency trauma, long-term care venue, and I've never looked back. It's been a wonderful, exciting career. In 1994, I decided to venture out to become a nurse entrepreneur, and that's when I started my company, MFW consultants to professionals. Just started growing the company from one service. I was cross-training to meet the cross-training education needs of managed care, the demands of managed care. And then that grew into speaking and coaching and legal nurse consulting. And now it's a multi-service firm that I'm very proud of. I've had it now for 27 years. Not bad for a me, myself, and I operation. Somewhere along the line, I was very active on LinkedIn, and that's essentially about 11 years ago. And I was also doing a spot on Nurse Success TV, which was a internet-based program. And it was a 15-minute televised program that was essentially the length of an average cup of coffee for a nurse. That was the premise. So that a nurse could tune in, have a cup of coffee, and watch the program. And I had a 90-second set on there where the nurses would email coaching questions and I would answer them. And AORN happened to be at one of those meetings and heard me speak and came up with the idea of having a professional coach as an added value feature for membership. And they reached out to me 10 years ago. We piloted it like we did a beta program. And I was in San Diego at the time. So this was 2012. And we were hoping people would come for coaching, not sure if people would come for coaching. I had about 20 hours of collective coaching over the 3-day weekend, which was Expo at that time. And 64 nurses came for coaching. I was like a lean, mean coaching machine. And, we knew then we were on to something. And then we've just kind of renewed that commitment every year. And I've coached hundreds of AORN members to my delight. Very, very proud to be part of that organization.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I'm just kind of wondering, what are the greatest needs for the OR nurses in terms of counseling? Where do you see the biggest issues in the staff that come to you from AORN?
Paul, it's a variety. It's really a spectrum or a continuum of needs. So some of them can be, I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for 2 years. I finally got the job of my dreams. I'm starting perioperative. Is there any advice you can give me to kind of, be successful at this? So it might start there. And it also could start because I do ask them or give them everybody the option of sending me your resume. So we can do resume development and we can talk about where there might be gaps or holes in your resume if you're thinking of either applying for a graduate school or if you're applying for your first, your entree into education and or administrative leadership or even executive leadership. So I've had new graduates and people with 40 years experience come to me for coaching, and all of those needs vary within that continuum.
So then let's start with the new graduates. What are the biggest barriers they're finding or issues that they're dealing with in the OR or getting into the OR?
Well, they're not having too many barriers getting into the OR. I think everybody's aware that, that's one of, maybe 4 or 5 specialties that will always have a need. It's a high pressure job. Not everybody is made for it. And it's really a special soul that wants to get into that particular specialty. So once people are in, if they've had a proper orientation, a fellowship or a intern orientation, Peri-op 101, it usually gives them the confidence and the skill base to want to stay for the length of time. So most new graduates are concerned about transitioning. Most new graduates are concerned about being taken seriously. They want to make sure that they're doing the right thing because they're respectful of people who are in the OR with, 20 plus years experience, and they want to fit in. They don't want to be that millennium or that Gen Z that nobody likes. They're trying very hard to navigate their way, but continue to have a sense of self so that they're not at the mercy of anybody. Some new graduates will call and talk about, perhaps a little bit of disruptive behavior and not the healthiest work environment. And we talk about ways to navigate that.
It's funny that you would bring up disruptive work environment because that's actually the next question I was going to ask was about bullying. A lot of new grads, they come in and they're overwhelmed. Sometimes they're the butt of jokes and various things, but the work environment can be hard. And the culture is very challenging sometimes in the OR. What advice do you give to these people who come to you about the work environment and about bullying?
So, Melanie, you're spot on when you say that, there are concerns about disruptive behavior and how that influences a healthy work environment or how it creates a toxic work environment. To AORN's credit, again, the forward thinking that AORN had to even think of adding career and personal coaching as an added value benefit for their members. Along those lines, they approached me, I want to say 2015 and around there, maybe a little earlier, to start thinking about putting together a program for their Nurse Executive Leadership Series addressing bullying and incivility in general, not just in peri-op, but bullying and incivility in general. And I did a 10-city tour with their Nurse Executive Leader Education Series. And I literally crisscrossed the country with AORN. I had put together a program. At the time, I was writing a book about bullying and incivility in healthcare and testing my theories and my feelings on this. And the content and my approach to bullying and incivility came out of coaching, not just AORN members, but being a professional coach for 20 plus years. And specifically, my target audience or my target client group are professional and family caregivers. So, we're at the moment now where we can no longer ignore the elephant in the room. And, I wish I could blame it on surgeons. Everybody would like to blame that neurosurgeon, that trauma surgeon. I wish I could blame it on anesthesia. It's not that they don't have, some cards in the game, but we're talking about nurses being uncivil to nurses. And unfortunately, even surgical techs getting in the mix, either participating in some disruptive behavior or being on the receiving end of disruptive behavior. So it is should we say, a departmental or a specialty issue that transcends peri-op and goes out through all of healthcare.
So you said you never practiced psych nursing, but I'm going to beg to differ because everything that you just talked about was absolutely taking that training and putting it into play. While you might not have been in an inpatient psychiatric unit, you absolutely are utilizing those skills. And you may not have known this, but my first job out of nursing school was on an adolescent unit as a charge nurse on adolescent psych. And I, thought I wanted to work with kids, couldn't get on the peds unit for med surg. And so that's where I wound up for, my first year, out of school. But I just heard that whole disruptive, culture really. And that reminded me of working on the psych unit with what they called the milieu and how you manage just everybody's kind of how they're feeling that day, what could go wrong, kind of sizing that up. And that's a big part of, having people who are a little insecure, who don't have that strength of experience behind them. They're very subject to the quote unquote milieu environment of the OR when they're new.
So I have several goals right now as a professional coach who happens to be a nurse, who's really, targeting her practice towards professional and family caregivers. One of them is, I'm very much dedicated to helping individuals untie the knot of their COVID experience. We still, for healthcare, COVID hasn't really stopped. We're in phase 1, phase 2, phase 5, phase 6, whatever phase you're in. It may not be COVID right now, but across the country, pediatric hospitals are at 110, 115% capacity. And it's been like that for about almost the last 3 months. And, if you're not getting hammered by COVID, now you're getting hammered by this. And for some inexplicable reason, these kids are not coming in with mundane issues. They're coming in with very serious, complicated healthcare issues. So that COVID experience is ongoing, and we keep pushing off the finish line of trying to really process what's going on with that. So a major part of my practice is dedicated to that. But the other piece is working with healthcare leaders to really address the issue of creating a healthy work environment. And the research that's out there now, you could look at the Harvard Business Review. You could look at Christina Maslach's work. She did the Maslach burnout scale. And she also talks about healthy work environment. Or you could even take a look at the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, who many years ago published the pillars for a healthy work environment. And you'll see there's a commonality among those given experts, that you're looking at skilled communication, true collaboration, authentic leadership, meaningful recognition, appropriate staffing, but none of them have talked about disruptive behavior. And I think this is where my work differs. When I do healthy work environment drill downs with healthcare leaders or healthcare organizations as a consultant, I'm going to talk about the accepted pillars of a healthy work environment, but I'm also going to share that you could have seamless communication and you can have seamless processes and policies and protocols and systems. But if you are, ignoring disruptive behavior, you still don't have a healthy work environment. You're still going to bleed the talent, and you're still going to have people undermining your initiatives to have the outcomes that you're looking for.
Phyllis, do you ever go into a specific department within an organization and do an assessment of where the issues might be that it's causing this backbiting and whatever that's going on?
So I have gone into organizations or been invited into organizations to come in and speak about, how to assess and effectively manage disruptive behavior, bullying, and chronic incivility in the workplace. But most people want the training. I've only had one organization actually say, well, here's our issue, and can you help us break it down? To their credit, they did some of the hard work that was needed to be successful on the end of that. So it's a difficult issue, Paul. And, Justin as a nurse can tell you this. Now, most of my clinical background is emergency trauma nursing. So, if you have 4 gunshot wounds in the emergency department and you have one emotionally disturbed patient and you say to a nurse, what assignment do you want? They're taking the 4 gunshot wounds because they know what to do clinically to manage a gunshot wound, where behavior is something that we lack appropriate training to understand and effectively manage. So, people are frightened of behavior. People don't know. People are concerned that they're going to get hurt. And when it comes to bullying and incivility, if it's not approached and managed with what I call the triad of safety, meaning executive leadership, management, and human resources, the person trying to raise awareness about a bullying situation could themselves find themselves dismissed because the person who is the bully is clever enough and schooled enough and adept enough at turning it around that they are a victim and you are the bully, and therefore you go and they stay. So there's reason to be concerned, and there's reason to look over both shoulders and maybe hesitate to appropriately address the issue. But what I've tried to share in my book, and what I've tried to share to as many people who will listen, is that there are safe ways to do it, but you can never, ever, ever attempt to work with either somebody chronically uncivil or someone who's a bully alone. You must engage executive leadership and human resources, or you're going to find yourself in a ton of hot water.
Boy, been there, done that. I can certainly relate to it. So what about staff that are maybe starting to physically be unable to do the rigors of the operating room or whatever department they're in? Once you get beyond 50 and you're having to twist and turn under the table in the operating room and stuff, some people can do it. I know nurses that are in their 70s that are still doing it, but how do you help them transition out of a role like that and help them get into something that may be more suited to their physicality at an older age?
So that's a great question, because the average age of a perioperative nurse is 58 across the country. So your question is highly appropriate and highly valid and shared by many. Okay. So, the first thing is I can share with you that over the last 10 years, every opportunity I get to speak to or interact with AORN members, I keep reminding them that there is when you turn around 50 or so, 52, 53, standing for the 4-hour case may not be something you want to do. And the only way to ensure that you can age gracefully into your career, because it can be done, all right, is to prepare yourself academically. You can prepare yourself with certifications, and you can prepare yourself with experience so that now your skill set is diverse enough, your education is more appropriate for positions that might take you out of the OR room itself and put you into infection prevention, quality management, nurse manager, or a director position, or even an educator position. Or one of the new things that's coming out, of course, is case management. That might be another area. Or if you decide that you really do love learning and you have an appropriate master's, you can go into either the online or the academic campus setting to do education. So there's tons of ways there to be able to transition from clinical practitioner to wisdom statement in your profession, but you have to be dedicated and aware enough and give yourself enough time to fill in the blanks of any academic holes, any other credentialing holes, and maybe start to take on some more cases and spread your bandwidth a little bit so that you have that much more to offer the next step in your career. Far too often, I get the phone call when the person is 55 and doesn't have a 4-year degree, and then we have to talk about that.
So when you're working with anyone really who is looking at their future, what else they may want to do either within the OR or outside of it, and they're looking at a leadership role or where they might want to advance, how do you coach them in that leadership development? And what is your advice to them when they're looking for that path?
Another great question, but you want to do enough listening to really try to understand what is it that person really wants to do. Because they'll talk to me about leadership when they actually want not administrative leadership, but perhaps education leadership, that branch of the leadership tree. So, right now with the push for every healthcare organization to become magnet, it's part of the magnet underpinning that leaders have to have at a minimum a master's degree, or at least they have to be in progress. Because prior to getting a magnet designation, you have to submit a magnet application, or what we call the book. And you have to submit your book. And in there is going to be statistics about how many of your nurses are baccalaureate prepared, master's prepared, or postgraduate prepared. How many of your nurses are certified and in what? So, if you're thinking along those lines and not quite in a place where you can go for your master's degree for the next step, at least get your CNOR, at least get your certifications, and do the other things that you can do while maybe your child is in college and you can only pay one tuition at a time. You also want to, bone up on your computer skills, and you also want to make sure that your computer is new enough with the right amount of Wi-Fi capability, speed, and memory, so that if you decide to access an online program, you're not going to torture yourself, but that you're just like we used to go to the bookstore and buy all the right books. Now it's you go to the computer store and buy all the right technology so that you can go to school online. And I am a big proponent of online education. You have to have the right temperament and discipline and mindset for online education. But I think in this day and age, with all the different challenges we have, but it's so user-friendly for a working professional to access that master's program or doctorate program online that, everybody should, really go ahead and do that. And there's so many good schools out there for it.
Boy, Phyllis, when I was getting my master's in 1986, they didn't even have computers. So yeah, it was a little bit harder back then, but I can see where this is so much easier. It's much more beneficial for people to be able to do it that way now. So yeah, it's great.
So full disclosure, Paul, I had somebody professionally type my master's degree too, because there were no computers. You're not alone here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost feel like with the world that we're in right now, it's going to be the only way to learn in a lot of cases if you're also a professional. I don't know how you balance being in all these different places at the same time, and the demands, on nurses are only going to get greater. You talked about the burnout and just the staffing situation, and some people that may be transitioning out of doing the hands-on work and into those leadership positions only hits us that much harder in that area. So, I think people are, as they grow their career, are going to be more and more wanting to do that. Phyllis, I can't believe how fast this interview has gone, because I feel like we just scratched the surface of a few really great topics, but I also had a sense that we probably could have just taken one of those and gone into great detail for at least a half hour on it. And I really took a lot away from this conversation, though, even though we did kind of just scratch the surface. I wondered if before we go, we could have you just give a few common coaching tips to some very common questions to sort of like frame people's minds around coaching and why, what the benefits are. Because I think sometimes people think about coaching and they do sort of equate it with therapy sometimes, like, oh, I'm strong enough. I can do this on my own. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'm independent. And while that may be true, for me personally, and part of the reason I'm a podcaster is because I love to talk things out loud. And I like to get other perspectives, that are away from the work environment in terms of getting guidance around some decisions with people who are just not involved in my day to day, so that they can see things and help me see them more clearly, especially in that bullying situation. I can see where that's so valuable. But can you throw a few at us and kind of help the audience kind of envision, why they should consider coaching?
Right. Well, I think it's important, Justin, to understand that coaching is not therapy. Okay. They're two distinct things. I am not credentialed for therapy, nor do I even try to dabble in that. Coaching is a form of interaction. It's a trusting relationship between the coach and the person being coached. The coaching process is something that's run by the coach. The subject of coaching, how often we meet for coaching and what is discussed during coaching, is driven by the person being coached. So the coach doesn't set the goals and the venue and and the agenda. That is the person who's being coached doing that. Okay. Now, if there's an agreement between the coach and the person being coached that I want to meet these goals, and you start resisting trying to reach some of those goals, it is the coach's responsibility to hold you accountable, to the goals that you yourself set. The coach didn't set them for you, but we have to try to keep you on track, because the coaching process at times can be uncomfortable. So, one of the biggest messages I want to share with every professional caregiver listening is that don't confuse endurance and resilience. Endurance is when we have to hunker down and get through a Hurricane Sandy, a forest fire, electric outage. You just have to hunker down and get it done. Resilience is the way that when life's challenges roll up to your door, you have the courage to lean into them so that you can get validation for where you are strong, but you also have an opportunity, if you show the courage, to acknowledge where you still need to do work. And in that work, doing that work, leaning in and doing the self-awareness that needs to happen, and then the self-management that follows, chewing on that glass, if you will, because it can be very uncomfortable for a professional adult to come to terms with habitual behaviors that are self-sabotaging, to understand that I've had these blind spots, but now I'm willing to lean in and work with them. That's where resilience is born. And you can find yourself far more comfortable in your own skin and far more successful. And people might even say to you, what's different about you? And you're saying, why? What are you saying? Because, well, you even drive differently. What's going on? But you're just that much more comfortable in your own skin. When you have mastered those first two competencies of emotional intelligence, or at least you've done a good deal of work, self-awareness and self-management, what that's intended to do then is help you lean into the social awareness and relationship management, so that in your struggle to come to terms with what it takes to be a professional adult in the 21st century, you start to realize that when someone else, your colleague, your friend, your family is also struggling, you're that much more relatable. You're that much more authentic because you've gone through it yourself. And instead of toughening up, you tool up. And in that commonness of the struggle and how much it takes to do the work is where empathy and compassion live. And that keeps you very, very tied to why we do what we do, the mission and purpose of being a professional caregiver. And that in and itself is the strongest way to maintain your resilience and beat burnout.
Man, Phyllis, that is an excellent answer. I'm inspired just listening to you. I think I might want to call up and talk to you later. But I mean, if
Melanie wants to tool up.
I need it. But if I did, like seriously, if I wanted to take advantage of the AORN benefit that of offering coaching that I also didn't know that they offered, and I am an AORN member, would I get you, or are there multiple coaches?
It's me. It's me.
Okay.
Yeah. Currently, they haven't informed me that there's a mini me. So you would go onto the AORN website. You would go to resources, Career Center resources, and just put in the search bar coaching. You would click on coaching services. It would take you to an email that would then you'd sign up. The email would come to me. I would reach out to you and find a mutually, good day or time to meet up or for me to contact you. And every time you renew your AORN benefit, you get another 90 minutes of free coaching with me. That's how it's worked for the 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So it's really something. And I have been encouraging AORN to make a big deal out of this because I'm so proud of them and inspired by what they've done. I really think they should be celebrated by the American Nurses Association. And I really think that the other professional associations should take a look at how AORN has cared for its members and really model them, based on that. That they've put their members first and they're thinking out of the box and they're really trying to have true, meaningful added value to the depth of their membership offering.
Fantastic, Phyllis. Great interview. And that last point, so critical. If you're going to be part of a professional trade organization, you should be supported. It should have a servant leadership type of approach. And, members should take advantage of the value that's there. And certainly there's a great deal of value here. You've sold me. You've proved it to me. This interview was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Such a pleasure to meet all of you.
That was Phyllis Quinlan, executive coach with AORN, an important message to be shared with all of the AORN membership out there that's listening to First Case today about free 90 minutes of coaching every time you renew your membership, which, honestly, the way that she characterized the whole component, Paul, of accountability. So it's not counseling, it's coaching. And it's a big distinction there with accountability. And part of the reason I know that is because I engaged a coach about 7 months ago for my very first time, although it wasn't a professional coach. It was a personal trainer to coach me on how to make my health more important and take a bigger priority in my life. And boy, when she talked about your habits and your behaviors that are undermining, kind of your success, that happens in your professional world as well. But from a personal experience, I really learned a lot about it in working with my personal trainer. And I can tell you, every one of us out there, at some point anyway, we all do things that self-sabotage, even in just the smallest way. And as she was talking about some of the coaching around leadership, that's when you can kind of get picked apart. And so being self-accountable and having somebody kind of help you with that is only going to help you grow your career. I thought she was phenomenal today, Paul.
Well, I agree, Justin, and I wish that I had known of this resource when I was an OR director or even as a hospital administrator, because I would have taken advantage of it. I just think that Phyllis really can articulate what you need to help you become more successful. And if you could give me the name of your personal trainer, coach, I could probably use that as well.
He does everything online. I met him in the middle of the pandemic. I didn't even meet him face to face for 6 months, and I'd already lost over 20 pounds. Paul, I'd be happy to give you his contact info. Well, Phyllis, you really got us excited and really motivated. And this is definitely a topic we haven't dove into before. And I think we can be rest assured we're going to have her back. And she recommended that we really start to open up a toolbox that she's developed for managing that disruptive behavior and bullying in the OR. So you can pretty much count on the fact that she will come back and be a guest on a future episode. But as for today, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can support First Case by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. You can also find us on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or just search for First Case on your favorite podcast application. We've also got bonus content for certain episodes. All you got to do is download our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And on behalf of Paul and Melanie, thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case.